Alright, welcome back everybody. I hope you're doing well. We've got another exciting entry in the Honored Madman lore catalog. Today we're going to talk about the wandering swordsman who became battle commander to the General Radahn and also a witch hunter in service to the Crown of Caria. He almost needs no introduction. We've seen him on countless loading screens, we've fought alongside him against Radahn in the festival, and we've either helped him capture a witch or get killed by said witch. That's right, we're going to be talking about witch hunter Jerry today. So the earliest records we have of Jaren are him being a wandering warrior that encountered the Carian royal family and was considered their esteemed guest. He's been described by those who knew him as a bit of an eccentric, but an overall likable and above all else loyal kind of guy. He befriended War Counselor E.G. and the Queen's own son, Radahn. Maybe he even served as the young demigod's fencing instructor depending on when he turned up in their court. Or perhaps they just got along because of a mutual warrior respect kind of thing. But the Carians soon became the formerly wandering vagabond's family. The old vagrant finally had a home, and as a result he was fiercely loyal to the Carians for this. He was presumably trained as an enchanted knight as he possesses one of their staffs. He learned their powerful and elusive sorceries and soon became a deadly spellcaster in his own right. He would even help the Carians deal with the small-scale rebellion at the Academy, where a group of sorcerers led by the Graven Witch Sellen and two founding-level mages, Lusat and Azur, were trying to return to the old ways of the Academy and follow the primeval current, the dangerously unstable source of all glintstone sorcery. Now, eventually, the two Grand Masters would be forced to flee, and Sellen herself would become a prisoner of the Carian royal family. Now, presumably she was captured by Jaren, who would then imprison her in the Witchbane ruins deep in the Weeping Peninsula. But to expand on this, I believe Carian preceptor and puppet enthusiast Celavis helped her quote-unquote escape, or at least claims to. Because we see her physical body is still imprisoned in Witchbane ruins, and the thing we interact with and buy spells from is just a magical projection. It looks like she didn't really get to escape, now did she? And yeah, Celavis could have just been lying about helping her escape, or about her owing him a favor, or whatever it is he says, although he does claim to have asked her to look into Nokron for him. At first I thought, oh, maybe he genuinely did try to help her escape and they got caught, so, he betrayed her to cover his own ass and have a potential plaything in the future. And sure, that's fine, but that doesn't really fit his character. Nah. What I think probably happened is that Celavis lied to Jaren that he himself took care of Sellen. It's possible that he even offered his assistance in her escape so she would perhaps let her guard down and fall into one of his many traps. I mean, it is Celavis after all. Now, if she did accept his assistance to escape, then it's possible he betrayed her so he could use her body at some later date, but being that Sellen is a very powerful sorceress, this imprisonment couldn't confine her indefinitely. She would create a projection of herself and then summon up guardians in the form of marionettes and even a wandering sphere of faces to protect her physical body, which was imprisoned in this ruin surrounded by a lake of poison. Following that, she relocated to Limgrave to plot against the Carians in peace. Now, if Celavis did betray Sellen, it would explain her apparent dislike of him, and it could also be assumed that since he was never able to retrieve her body because it was so heavily defended, he just took to creating a very close replica, something any sane man would do. Now, I do think that given Celavis's position as a Carian preceptor, he possibly outranked Jaren, so when he claimed Sellen was dead, then they all had to take it as fact. Although I'd imagine Jaren himself privately distrusted Celavis, and that's why he swore his solemn vow to finally end the Graven Witch Sellen. The one that got away, if you will. Celavis himself is sort of a traitor to the royal family, and it's kind of weird that Jaren never noticed how suspicious the preceptor was, but I guess he didn't spend a whole lot of time around him. But yeah, after capturing Sellen, Jaren was henceforth known as the Witch Hunter. When the Shattering inevitably broke out, Jaren of course served under Radahn. He would even rope his good buddy War Counselor E.G. into forging weapons for the Redmanes in their campaign against the Cleanrot Knights of Melania.
By the by, is that old fool still hammering out weapons? His enormous frame cramped in that little place? Bit of a haughty sort. Strange fella when I knew him. And funny thing, his swords were all blunt as stone, but not one of them decayed when faced with a scarlet rot.
Fortunately for both of them, Radahn would just be too strong for his own good, and when he fought Melania, she would have to go nuclear to quote-unquote meet his measure. shedding a piece of her own humanity in the process. Now, unfortunately for Radahn, he lost all of his humanity and basically became a mindless animal. Jaren was understandably horrified, so he took it upon himself and swore a solemn oath to grant Radahn a worthy death. And to that end, he would host a yearly festival where he would gather all the powerful warriors from all across the lands between, and together they would run the Great General's Fade. Jaren would organize this festival countless times, to the point where by the events of the game, he'll only jump into the fight if it actually looks like the challengers have a chance. In that case, once second phase has been activated, you can actually summon him. We gotta take a second just to appreciate how good of a friend Jaren is. He essentially dedicates his life to what very well could be an impossible task. You gotta remember, Radahn was considered the strongest of all the demigods. Even the weakest of demigods could probably be a challenge for a group of powerful warriors. But this was Radahn, the strongest of them all. Even in his current feral state, he's still just as dangerous as any of the other demigods, just a little bit less smart. And luckily for Jaren, one day all of his hard work would pay off and a nameless tarnish would show up and give Radahn the good death he deserved. At that point, finally freed from his vow, Jaren recalled an even older oath that he swore, and that was of course to finally settle the score with Selen, or as E.G. refers to her, a long-standing carrion weed who needs to be plucked. And who better to do this plucking than Jaren?
Now the festival is over, and General Radahn is defeated. Jaren's duties are finally fulfilled. Though we served different masters, I could see he was truly adept in his role. Now the time has come to remind him of an old promise made. With the stars of fate set into motion, a certain sorceress is dispossessed of her immortality. Finally, we can be rid of a long-standing carrion weed.
So after finally leaving Redmane Castle for what must have felt like an eternity, Jaren follows the trail to none other than the Witchbane Ruins. I used to think he already knew where to look, but I'm guessing the wandering sphere of faces made it a little too obvious, and that's how he managed to locate her. Or maybe Celavis tipped him off, because I don't think Jaren was the one who imprisoned her there. Because if he did imprison her, why wouldn't he have just destroyed her primal glintstone and be done with it? She seems too dangerous to have been left alive, especially by somebody like Jaren. I mean, it literally would have prevented this exact scenario, so I don't think he knew she was imprisoned. I think Celavis just lied to him, and he was forced to just believe him because perhaps Celavis outranked him, or he couldn't find any evidence to prove otherwise because he was about to go on a campaign with Radahn, and maybe Jaren just thought he would get to the bottom of it when he came home from the war. We all know how that would play out, but there's no way he could have predicted how badly things would go in Caelid. But when he finds her corpse, he quickly deduces that she's definitely still out there somewhere, one of his greatest fears, by the way. And it probably didn't take him long to deduce that. As soon as he saw her chained to the wall missing that primal glintstone, he was like, fuck. I guess that's what you get for trusting Celavis. I mean, many people have been fooled before. I'd like to think Jaren would kill Celavis if he hadn't already been killed by Ranni. But anyway, he quickly deduces where she's gonna go next, and of course, it's the queen she's going after. So he quickly tracks her to the Raya Lucaria Academy, specifically the library, and prepares for one final showdown. I don't think that they ever went up against each other previously, but it's strongly hinted that Selen herself is a founding level sorcerer with an intimate knowledge of the primeval current, a very powerful source of sorcery, and on top of that, she's already killed several sorcerers. Jaren himself is a battle-hardened war commander and quite a powerful sorcerer and sword fighter in his own right, but I have to imagine his age has somewhat slowed him down a bit, and I think it's safe to assume that he at least kinda thinks he'll die in this fight. But perhaps that's all he's looking for, a good death against a powerful foe, and this one at least there's some history there, so you know, who better to die fighting against other than Selen? I mean, she was perfect for his final battle. Now, as we know, whether he lives or dies is entirely up to the player, but I've often just sort of let it play out. And I'll say the fight is surprisingly close. Probably like 6 times out of 10, Selen wins, and 4 times out of 10, Jaren wins, but those fights are never super one-sided. Actually, except for the first one. The first one might have been, but you get what I mean. Even the way Jaren announces himself when he invades Selen's world to have that one last fight against her, it sort of sounds like a last hoorah, like one last good fight. His little speech definitely had that sort of vibe to it, in my opinion. And sure enough, if he manages to survive, he seems genuinely surprised. And at that point, he truly doesn't know what the future brings, so he's like, you know what, screw fate, we're gonna meet again. You know, that's what he tells the player. After all the previous times, he's like, well, if the fates deign it, we'll meet again. This time he's like, you know, screw the fates, we'll meet again. We're comrades now. Like, he now has that same bond with you that he had with Radahn. At least it seems like. I mean, you fought his arch nemesis and helped him beat her. One interesting thing I noticed is that even if Jaren dies, like he fails to stop Sellen, it doesn't mean the end for the Carians. In fact, Sellen sort of is her own undoing in the end, and the Queen of Caria walks away from the whole thing completely unscathed, although her mental state is still quite warped. Nothing new there though, of course. I wonder then, in the event that he does survive his encounter with Sellen, just what he does next. I imagine he keeps rooting out Caria's enemies and almost reestablishes their dominance single-handedly. I mean, the dude's fucking capable of it. I mean, this is a guy who definitely knows the riddle of steel. And it's very possible that after settling this final score with one of Caria's enemies, that he just returned to a simple life of wandering. Unfortunately, though, he would never meet the Tarnished again and would go on to die in the Battle of Stalingrad in 1943. But in all seriousness, though, he probably did help re-establish Caria as a superpower, and maybe if you happen to go through with Ranni's ending, it sort of sets the stage for her return. Just something I was thinking about while I was editing this. But yeah, I don't have a whole lot more to say. Jaren's actually a pretty straightforward character. He's someone I wanted to talk about for a while, but I always felt like he wasn't going to be that interesting to retell his story. But I was totally wrong. I really enjoyed re-looking over his character and all of his quotes and shit. Plus, the guy's got one of the coolest fits in the entire game, and he's got one of the coolest weapons. I love the Flamberge. I don't really see what makes him so eccentric outside of his clothing, but that's probably what they meant. And yeah, let me know if I missed anything in the comments, but I think I got everything I could think of about Jaren out of the way. And as always, I hope you guys found this video at least somewhat informative and at least somewhat amusing. If you liked it, please like it. If you disliked it, please dislike it. And if you like hearing me ramble on about various video game characters in the occasional movie or TV series, please consider subscribing. It really helps the channel out, and we're almost about to crack that 17K, which is, to me, a big deal. That's a hell of a lot of people. And it's really all because you guys are so cool and supportive of the videos and whatnot. But yeah, I'll stop rambling and get to that outro. So yeah, my video list is all over the place. I'm seemingly doing videos at random on it. Still starting projects without finishing others, but we've got a really interesting New Vegas video coming up, and I still need to decide which one of the FromSoft games I'm going to cover next, like which, at least out of the topics on my list. I know one of them I haven't mentioned yet, but I have actually got some work done on, is a video about the Profane Flame, which I find quite interesting. Or at least its origins. A lot of cut content surrounding that shit, though, so that's kind of the nature of Dark Souls 3, though, unfortunately. But look at me rambling. I've inhaled too many fumes while brewing, so I'm gonna let you guys go. As always, you have a good one, and I will see you next time. Be safe.